should we bring in the closer?
I think it'd be a good time for that.
All right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Free Baseball Podcast presented by the Athletes Hub. It's episode number 78. And as always, I am Davis Bird, joined by world's number one mustachioed Texas Rangers fan, Jake Crumpler. And we're here to talk about the playoffs, obviously, because it's the playoffs. We've done the whole thing for the regular season. We missed Wednesday because I'm a bum. My fault. We're gonna talk about all the playoff series that have happened so far tonight, and we're gonna talk about the ones that are yet to come. But first, how are you, Jake? How are you doing?
I'm chilling. Yeah. I mean, we sort of missed Wednesday. It was sort of a weird date to do a podcast. I felt like this weekend would probably have been better either way because it allowed us to sort of review everything while things are at a standstill. You don't have that uncertainty of talking about a series that could go one way or the other in the next couple of days. So I think now, while we're in between the division series and championship series, it gives us a good stopping point to sort of review where we've been and forecast where we're going. But I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, I've been watching a lot more baseball than I have all year, and it's been really fun. And other than that, yeah, just slaving away at my 9 to 5.
Feel that for sure, but we can escape the 9 to 5 with playoff baseball, and we can start with the wild card series because there were 4 of them. Everyone, this sort of format has kind of had like people up in arms, some, not all, but we can start with the Twins sweeping the Blue Jays. A whole lot of sweeps to talk about. Start with this one.
Yeah, that was crazy that every single wild card series went with a sweep. It did create a couple days of no baseball as we are experiencing right now. So that really sucked. But yeah, Twins, Blue Jays, that one was pretty surprising because the Blue Jays offense completely got shut down, which understandable given where the Twins pitching staff is at. They've got a couple really good starters. They've got a very solid bullpen, but that Blue Jays lineup can be scary. But with its current status, with Vladdy sort of just being mid, the rest of that team isn't really too scary and is one that can definitely be beat. So the Twins sort of ran away with that one pretty easily. And to my surprise too, I had the Blue Jays moving on.
I think I also had the Blue Jays moving on, and you talked about Vladdy a little bit. Vladdy kind of made the base running gaff that lost him a game and picked off at second to end it in one of those in the sweep course. But I think we both had the Jays to win this series, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest story from that one was probably Royce Lewis. I mean, we talked about him earlier this season because of all his grand slams, and he's been a top prospect for a while, former number 2 overall pick. But that guy's really good. His first career postseason at bat, hit a home run. Second career postseason at bat, hit a home run. He drove in all of the team's runs in that first game, and he drew a walk. No player in MLB history had ever hit multiple home runs, drove in all of the team runs, and drew a walk in a postseason victory. So he right off the bat was setting records.
Definitely. And I think it's important to talk about the Twins. I think they went from they lose 90 games last year to making the playoffs.
You'll have to look that up.
I will have to look that up. I'm going to do that right now. But yeah, the Twins beat the Blue Jays, and they beat it really off the back of their pitching because both games ended up I think the total runs for both games were under 5. It was like a 2-0 and then 3-1 or something like that. Pretty crazy. We talked about that being the one strength that the Twins really had in it, and it worked out in their favor. The Blue Jays, sort of a mess. It sort of felt like they were one of the teams, one of the many teams that really limped into the postseason. You sort of get the same vibes, and it just kind of carried on. They just couldn't really get it done.
Well, they sort of screwed themselves over in that last game. This is where we saw the first controversy in the postseason when John Schneider was sort of itching to remove Jose Barrios from his start to get Yusei Kikuchi out of the bullpen. And that did not go well in multiple facets. The bullpen was unable to hold the game where it was at. Kikuchi unable to do so as well. He pitched fine, but coming after being a starter all year long and then pitching in your first postseason game and being coming out of the bullpen without a clean inning, like mid-inning too, that's got to be pretty difficult to do in the playoffs.
Yeah, over managing is a big theme of the last few playoffs. It feels like There's obviously the question with the Jays, and then we can talk about it a little bit later with the next Twins series. There's a little over managing there that sort of cost them, like last season, a few instances, and then of course the big one with like Blake Snell and like the World Series where they pulled him. It feels like everyone's like super quick to judge managers like when they make the move like that, the analytically driven moves or whatever. Everyone tries to shit on them for. It's like it's sort of tired. But we talked about the Rays a little bit now. We can go ahead and move on to the next series, which is, of course, another sweep because they all were, and it's the Rangers sweeping the Tampa Bay Rays. We both had – well, did we both have the Rangers moving on?
I had the Rays.
Well, I'm pretty sure I had the Rangers, but I didn't really expect it to be a sweep. But, yeah, this is one to talk about the playoff seeding or whatever, and, like, you see the tweets where a bunch of the chuds are talking about the format. Like, the Rays won 99 games, but – they kind of got in the wild card.
Yeah, I mean their offense was just unable to do anything. The Rangers starters just completely shut them down. Jordan Montgomery, game 1, game 2, Nathan Eovaldi. I mean, you'll sort of forget about him, especially because he really struggled down the second half. But this is a guy that is basically a postseason legend for the Red Sox back in 2018. I think that's when it was. Just was a legend out of the bullpen for them, and that continued here for the Rangers. He was able to shut them down in game 2, and the Rays were just unable to score. It didn't really matter how good their pitching staff was. They just weren't able to push across any runs. And when you're doing that and going up against one of the top 2 offenses in baseball, which sort of completely flipped a switch after sort of struggling down the stretch. They really turned it on back in the playoffs. Their lineup is super deep. Evan Carter, their top prospect, also was making a lot of headlines by having a lot of success, but that lineup is really difficult to beat. And if you're not scoring any runs, I don't think it really matters how good your pitchers do in that series.
Yeah, the Rays have sort of had their postseason woes from last year carry over too. I think they've scored from their they've played 4 postseason games because they got swept last year by the Guardians. They scored like 2 or 3 runs. I'm gonna look that up. They got shut out 4-0 and they lost 7-1. Yeah, in 2022 they lost 2-1 and 1-0. So they scored 2 runs in four postseason games across 2 seasons. Yeah, which is not great, but the Rays were sort of beaten down, and they were a team that definitely did, at least with their rotation, limp into like the postseason because they were missing. We talked about it last podcast. They're missing McClanahan, Jeffrey Springs. Who else was gone from them?
Drew Rasmussen. Yeah, I mean there were other guys too. Shane Baz. They had a whole like all-star rotation worth of guys on the IL. So, but like I said, it doesn't really matter how good your pitching is if you're only going to push across 1 run in a 2-game series, one against one of the best offenses in baseball. It really didn't seem like they had a chance once the game started going, which surprised me. I mean, usually the Rays are able to, sort of surprise everyone every single year, and the past 2 years they've been unable to do so. And it seems like they really just need a couple bats that you can trust every single game, and maybe just not having Wander Franco. That was like the big thing for them this year. But I mean, that's not something really they could have controlled there. It's not an injury. It's a interesting, weird, not fun situation. But yeah, I think that they really got shot in the foot there.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions too about the Rays offseason now because I mean they won 99 games, but it's kind of shown now that they're going to struggle in the playoffs if their offense can't really do anything. And their team, I think they're like 27th. They're in like bottom 5 for payroll because they're not really paying anyone. Obviously now with Wander Franco, he was the only one making any real significant money, and that guy's in jail somewhere. Who knows what that guy.
Yeah, I mean it hasn't really hurt them in the past that they haven't been spending money. I mean they're winning so many games.
They are, but
you can see when it gets you can see when it gets to the postseason
now.
They don't have the name value.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like they've shown that they can win regular season games. It's very clearly working, and they're getting there. They had 86 wins last season. We sort of talked about them not making the playoffs. I know I did the way too early predictions. I was like, oh, they won't make it. Maybe like a dumb. They won 99 games, and then it's now 2 seasons in a row where they've scored 2 combined runs across 4 games in a wild card series and been swept twice because they can't scrape enough runs by to help their pitching. And even though this time, their pitching is completely decimated, it's like they played the Rangers and they had 1 game where they really got blown up. and that's 7 runs. Like, that's difficult to even call that really getting blown up now. 7-1 and 4-0. Like, they scraped 1 run in 2 games. That's just difficult for them on that end. We can go ahead and move on to the NL side. We can talk about probably the big surprise. Neither of us had this one, but it was the Diamondbacks sweeping the Brewers.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like once they won that first game with Brandon Pfaadt pitching, the Brewers really had no chance there. You had a pretty good matchup of Pfaadt versus Burns, a good matchup for the Brewers in terms of hoping that they win that. And I thought them winning that first game, that would sort of key everything off from there. But the fact that the D-backs were able to hold on, I think the biggest surprise there was how good their offense was, because they've sort of been an underwhelming offense all year, but with a couple of the role players coming through and Corbin Carroll doing what he's done all year, they were able to really attack the Brewers, which have a pretty incredible pitching staff, but they sort of forced them into a corner pretty early on, and then they were really unable to recover. Obviously, they were without Brandon Woodruff, who's going to miss a significant portion of next season after having shoulder surgery. But at this point, the Brewers were going Corbin Burns, Freddie Peralta. I mean, that's one probably 2 of the best pitchers you could have going in a 2-game series, if we're just looking at teams' rotations. But the D-backs were able to survive that first one, allowing them to go to Gallen in game 2, and I felt like it was over from there, especially with the way the offense was clicking. You got Paul Sewald closing down games. They seem pretty set. They surprised me, and mostly because that their offense was able to really take advantage of the Brewers pitching, which is not something many teams can say that they've done. And the Brewers offense was not one that I expected to do what it was doing. But, Corbin Carroll and the rest of that team were really hitting on all cylinders.
Definitely. You talked about the Brandon Pfaadt game. That box score is the funniest box score I've ever seen in a playoff game, in which team won. Like, you can look at did I send you the tweet that had it?
I don't know.
The box score for the Brandon Pfaadt start was this. Brandon Pfaadt went 2 2/3, gave up 7 hits, 3 earned, 1 walk, 4 Ks. Joe Mantiply got 2 outs, so 0.2, 1 walk. Miguel Castro, 2 outs, 1 walk. Ryan Nelson, 1 out. Ryan Thompson, 1 2/3. Kevin Ginkel threw 2 innings, and then Paul Sewald got to save. That's like almost their entire bullpen used in one night, which is crazy. That they won that game, which sort of is really telling about the Brewers. They scraped 5 runs across 2 games, and that's just, I think I said that later, like, for a reason why I don't think they would have beaten the Dodgers, because I predicted them to still beat the Diamondbacks. Like, their offense is bad, but man, the Diamondbacks really, really, really took it to the Brewers.
Like I said, I thought the pitching would make up for whatever deficiencies the Brewers were facing, without Angel Perdomo in the bullpen, and without Brandon Woodruff in the rotation, and with a lineup that's pretty lackluster. But I thought, their top 2 starters in the back end of their bullpen would really make them a good matchup for a Diamondbacks team that didn't really have a strong offense or a strong rotation or a strong bullpen. But, the fact that the D-backs were able to pounce on them pretty early and prove that the bright lights of the postseason weren't going to shut them down, then I think it really swung the series pretty quickly.
Yeah. It also seems to be like sort of like a theme for the Brewers to be playing a team that almost always is like red hot as soon as the postseason starts. Like, it feels like it's been like the last 4 seasons where they've done okay and then just run into a buzzsaw and had no chance, which sucks for the Brewers. Doesn't suck for me, obviously, but I think it's pretty great. But it's just been a weird postseason so far. The 84 win Diamondbacks making it pretty far. We'll talk about that later. And then the last series we can talk about, the NL East showdown of the Philadelphia Phillies and the Miami Marlins.
There was no question here. I mean, the Phillies are probably the best built team in the National League for the postseason at this point. Probably the only team in all of baseball that can really compete with them right now, the Astros, in terms of being built for the postseason. And they were going up against a Marlins team, which not really an offensively inclined team. And they were without a couple of their biggest starters, Eury Perez out, Sandy Alcantara, Tommy John surgery. They're relying on some starters that Jesus Luzardo is great, but from there it's pretty underwhelming. And it was really just a matter of letting the games play out for the Phillies to move on there. I mean, there was really no question.
Yeah, I think we both said We both picked the Phillies to go pretty far the last
I think
podcast.
everybody picks the Phillies to win that one.
Yeah, everyone probably picked the Phillies to win this one. There is a little bit of cool history attached to this one, which we can talk about later. But the Phillies are the first club that are going to play all four expansion franchises in a postseason. They played the Rockies, played the Rays in 2008. They played the Rockies in 2007. They played the Rays in 2008. They played the Marlins now, and we'll talk about the next one once we get to it. But we can go ahead and move on out of there because I really don't think there's much else to talk about. The division series, pretty interesting. We can start with the Astros and the Twins.
Yes. This one, I made new predictions on my other podcast, In the Pen, over on pitcherlist.com. It's a bullpen centric podcast, but we've been doing postseason talk, and it's hard to discuss anything else. We actually we planned stuff to talk about for that episode, and then we were just like, okay, we'll do a little bit of postseason talk before we get to it, and then we just talked about the postseason for an hour. And we were just like, okay, I guess we're not talking about anything other than the postseason until we're officially into the off season. We'll be recording a new episode next week, so check into the Pitcher List Fantasy Baseball Podcast Network next Friday for the new episode there. But anyway, back to the division series. The Astros were, the team. You look at this matchup and you think Astros are going to win this easily, especially considering the history that the Astros have had in the division series over the past 6 years. Previous 6 years, they won the division series every single year. They've been in the ALCS now 7 years in a row. I won't bury the lead here. I think everybody already knows the Astros beat the Twins in 4 games. But yeah, I mean, the Twins put up more of a fight than I would have thought. But I mean, you're going up against maybe the best team in the postseason here. There really wasn't going to be much of a fight here, but we did get to see Royce Lewis continue to hit bombs. Carlos Correa coming through. He had that one game-ending diving play to get Jeremy Pena out. That was pretty sick. But other than that, I mean, Pablo Lopez was really great, but the Astros were just too difficult to overcome. Yordan Alvarez just absolutely incredible in the postseason all the time. And Christian Javier actually had a historic start. I think that was game 3. He, after his starting game 3, he's now allowed 1 hit or fewer in each of his first 3 career postseason starts. No other pitcher in MLB history has had 3 such starts over his entire postseason career. And Javier has done that in 3 consecutive starts. So for a guy that had a lot of hype going into this season and did not live up to it at all, the postseason success continues. This is a guy that he's like right-handed Blake Snell to me, where he hasn't quite reached his peak, but he's just going to walk everybody and nobody's going to touch him,
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to get anything off him, it's going to be through walks. And I think he walked 4 batters in that game, but he only allowed 1 hit. He pitched really well for 5 innings, and he just continued his streak of pitching well in the postseason there.
Yeah. The Twins really, really put up a lot more of a fight than I think anyone expected them to, mainly because I don't think anyone expected them to get this far in the first place. Mm-hmm. And to take a game and make it an away game, like a game in I almost said Tropicana, I'm stupid. In Minute Maid, the same thing, Juice Company. In Minute Maid, they split the series and they got back, they lost 1 game in a blowout and then they lost by 1 run. They put up a lot more of a fight for probably what I think a lot of people consider to be the worst team that made the playoffs. At least that's sort of what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, the Astros definitely feel like the best team equipped to come out on the AL side to win. It's just they're obviously you talked about Christian Javier and the rest of their starting rotation being very good. Obviously their lineup is the Astros lineup. Everyone knows how good they are. But I think I still want to try to give the flowers to the Twins for even making it this far, mainly because everyone thought they were a bunch of bums. So shout out to the Twins for not really looking like a bunch of bums. We can move on to our next series, which is the Rangers sweeping the Orioles. And that makes it, 0-7?
5 straight.
0-7 for the AL East this postseason?
Yeah, they got absolutely wrecked.
pretty rough. What were you saying?
The Rangers 5-0.
Yeah, their lineup is so good. Like it's just their lineup's gas, man.
Yeah,
really, really damn good.
and I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the next segment, previewing the championship series. But now that they'll have Scherzer back for the championship series, their team is really starting to come together. And really, the only deficiency there is the bullpen. But it really didn't matter in this series because that offense was so good. And I mean, a lot of people want to sort of shit on the postseason format for teams like the Orioles and the Dodgers and the Braves going down after being 100-win teams during the regular season. But I think there's clear explanations for why each of those teams went down. We can start with the Orioles. They are a team that has zero postseason experience. Like the only guy that played in the postseason in their lineup was Aaron Hicks, and he's more of a platoon guy for them, and he was a guy that played with the Yankees for most of his career, but it's not like he's like a big postseason performer. And I think just that lack of experience there is definitely something you can blame. I think also just like a young rotation that's pretty unproven. You're going with Cal Bradish and Grayson Rodriguez and your first two guys, both guys great seasons in 2023. Grayson Rodriguez mostly in the second half, pretty underratedly. But those guys as your top two, it's pretty hard to trust those two. I mean, Rodriguez clearly was too small for the spotlight, but outside of that, you're missing Felix Bautista. That was sort of the big caveat for me. I picked the Orioles to move on, but when I did my updated predictions on my other podcast, I went with the Rangers because not only had I seen their offense come back to life in the wildcard series, but also I had the information that Felix Bautista was not going to be available. And that was sort of one of the key factors for me. It looked like he was going to make it back. Now he's undergoing Tommy John surgery, and he was the best reliever in baseball by far during the regular season. And he sort of held that whole team together and really gave them an upper hand in the late innings. Like if you can use that guy for the 8th and 9th or just the 9th, it really shuts things down. But without him, that bullpen becomes pretty weak. And like I said, with the inexperience in the lineup and in the rotation, it's difficult to beat a team that's really like at the top of its game right now. Just 1 through 9, that lineup. You got a couple great starters and a bullpen that's really riding on Jose Leclerc right now. He's pitched in every single game they've played in thus far. 5 games. Jose Leclerc has closed out all of them. But yeah, the Rangers really going crazy. I mean, Evan Carter, he keeps like every single game that he plays in, he sets a new record for like times on base for a rookie. I think the last one that I liked on Twitter was 6 days ago. Evan Carter reached base safely 11 times in his first 4 career postseason games. It's the most by a rookie in his first 4 career postseason games. And I think the biggest thing from this series that was crazy was Corey Seager setting the record for most walks in a single game in postseason history with 5. I mean, that game, I think the Rangers walked like 12 times or something crazy, but they were scared out of their minds of Corey Seager and like he deservedly so.
Yeah, they're so good. They're 1 through 3. I think if you can get decent starts out of like Nathan Eovaldi, if Scherzer comes back, same thing. If he doesn't get blown up, like the Rangers look really, really prepared to take it to Houston. Yeah, I picked the Orioles to beat them, but their offense just blew up the Orioles. The lack of experience sort of showing, but the Rangers very deservedly so in the ALCS. And then the last one to talk about. Well, not the last one to talk about. The next one to talk about is Jake's favorite one. I'm sure he will love to talk about is the Diamondbacks sweeping the Los Angeles Dodgers, the dog shit Dodgers getting destroyed by the Diamondbacks, as a matter of fact. Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
You want to know what's crazy? When we repredicted these division series, I would have gone 4 for 4. Had I taken the opportunity to shit on the Dodgers once again, but I chose the Diamondbacks. I convinced myself, the Dodgers are just they may not be as good as they have been in years past, but I was convinced that they were going to be able to take down the Diamondbacks, and boy, was I wrong and disappointed. But it did allow me to like root for the Diamondbacks even more, even though it proved me wrong. I don't know. I sort of just convinced myself the Dodgers, they just like you forget how deep their lineup is, how good their bullpen is, and they got a couple solid starters that could do something. But boy, was I wrong about the freaking starters. They are awful. Clayton Kershaw, once again, doing his hands on his knees and hands in his head in the dugout, or head in his hands in the dugout. Every year he does it, and it's so funny. It's honestly like a tradition like no other, where just every single year he blows up in the postseason. It's crazy how bad he is in the postseason. I saw a stat of the largest difference between regular season career ERA and postseason career ERA, and there are some guys on that list that have better ERAs in the postseason than during the regular season, but Kershaw by far has the largest difference, and it is in the negative direction. So he's the most disparate pitcher between how he pitches during the regular season and how he pitches during the postseason. And it's pretty incredible how bad he is. He just got freaking roughed up. And then Bobby Miller, super young guy. Can't really blame him for that one. Had the best start, 1 2/3 innings, 3 earned runs. And Lance Lynn, of course, I mean, he loves giving up home runs. He gave up 4 home runs in an inning. I think that was the first time ever a team has hit 4 home runs in an inning in postseason history. Those were the only runs they needed to win that game. But yeah, it was pretty crazy how handily the Diamondbacks were able to take care of them. Not only was their offense able to take advantage of the terrible starts put up by the Dodgers starting pitchers, but their bullpen was able to hold the leads, and their starters were able to sort of do exactly what you asked them to do. Merrill Kelly game 1, Zach Gallen game 2, and Brandon Pfaadt surviving game 3. And they're pretty well set up for the next series. They just really have proven a lot of people wrong. And while they're going to have a difficult matchup in the CS, they've done a good job, 5-0 to start the postseason.
Yeah, the Dodgers, real bad. Lance Lynn gave up like 4.5 home runs because Gabriel Moreno hit a foul home run by like 3.5 inches, and then hit a home run in the very next pitch. It was extremely funny. It was very obvious. Honestly, after the first start, and we all sort of knew. You talked about it. I talked about it. The same thing last podcast. The Dodgers rotation was cooked before even starting this series. Clayton Kershaw, a beaten down and worn out Clayton Kershaw. He's like what, like 35, but he's got
600.
He's got, it feels like it because he's got so many miles on his arm. He's cooked or he's hurt or something. He got 1 out. He gave up 6 earned runs.
He always sucks in the postseason.
Well, he always does, but like, I don't know if he's ever sucked that bad before. He gave up 6 earned on 6 hits and a walk. He got 1 out. Like,
nice.
It's really
That's
bad.
what I like to see.
Really, really bad. Yeah. Also, if you want to talk about the Dodgers and a lineup not helping out starting pitching, the 2 stars for Los Angeles, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, most likely 2-3 for MVP. Combined for like 1 for 22, and it was an infield single that could potentially have been ruled an error, very like fatefully ruled a single for them, or else they're going over. Just completely shit the bed all around.
Yeah, I got some stats for that one. The Dodgers had 16 more wins than the D-backs, and they lost the series in each of the last 3 postseasons. The Dodgers have lost to an opponent. They had 15 more wins than in the regular season. There had only been 3 prior instances of a team losing a playoff round in which they had at least 15 more wins than their opponent. And the Dodgers have done that in 3 straight seasons. That had only happened 3 times prior, and the Dodgers have done it 3 years in a row. Just, you love to see it. I also have the D-backs are the first team in MLB history to sweep a postseason series against a team that won at least 15 more games than them during the regular season. Pretty incredible. Also, with the Dodgers and Orioles both getting swept this postseason, this is the first time multiple 100-win teams were swept in a single postseason all time. But like I said, this is not something that's because of the playoff format. We spoke on how the Orioles weren't really set up for this postseason. The Dodgers sort of the same way. Their offense was a lot worse than it has been in years past. Their bullpen, sort of the same situation, but mostly it was the rotation just completely decimated by injuries. You're relying on some really young guys, a trade deadline acquisition that really hasn't been good all year, and your franchise, the face of the franchise, who's famously awful in the postseason. So that one you could see from a mile away, right? Just, if you're not able to get good starts in the postseason, you're sort of screwed.
Yeah. We'll talk about that a little bit after this next series, but I'm excited for next year when the Dodgers make the playoffs and they lose to the Rockies, because now they're going to keep running down the line. They've lost first they lost the division in a game 163 to the Giants. Real great. Awesome. Cool. Got trash can by the Padres last year, swept by the Diamondbacks this year. Next year, it's the Rockies' year. They're beating the Dodgers in the playoffs. It's going to be really, really exciting. We can move on to the next series, and we're going to talk a little bit about the playoff seeding more there, I'm sure, because lots of people will be real mad on twitter.com. The Phillies beat the Atlanta Braves in 4 games, just the 4. And yeah, I think we both predicted this, but I don't think a lot of people would have really, really erred on the side of the Braves are going to look really bad in this series.
I don't know. If we go back to the conversation we've had about the Dodgers and the Orioles being 100-win teams, that were sort of tricking viewers and fans into thinking that they, in the postseason, are the team that they were during the regular season, I think we can have that conversation about the Braves, because the Braves won the most games in baseball during the regular season, but their rotation also decimated by injuries. Max Fried wasn't pitching at his best, dealing with a blister, missed out on his final couple of starts of the season. They're without Charlie Morton. They're without Cal Wright. They're without the majority of the rotation. It was basically just Spencer Strider. I mean, even Bryce Elder, who, what was a guy for them for the first half of the season. Phipps started catching up with him, but this was a team that had a clearly really good offense and a clearly really good bullpen and no starters. It was like Spencer Strider and that's it. And that's really a deficit that's difficult to overcome. I mean, as much as you can talk about how good that lineup is, one of the best lineups of all time during the regular season, and a bullpen that's really trustworthy. If you don't have starters that can get you 5 innings or whatever of good baseball, it's going to be difficult to come back, especially with the way the Phillies are built and with how they're playing. I mean, they're a clear vibes team that is also built super well. It's like if the Astros, but like with better vibes, and that's difficult to beat when it comes to the postseason. And this series was really a lot of fun. One of my favorite moments was I think it was game 1. Trey Turner made that diving double play. That was super sick. Just an incredible play. But yeah, I mean, the Braves were, I think, lucky to win 1 game.
They were extremely lucky to win 1 game. And I honestly think they only ever held a lead twice. I think they had a lead when they went ahead the game where Michael Harris made the diving double play to end the game. And I think they had they had the lead in game 4 where Austin Riley hit a solo shot and they were up 1-0 for 1/2 inning before it was tied up again. And I said it last week. I know we both talked about, like, we both thought the Phillies were better built for the postseason than them. And I even said it too. You talked about the lack of like rotation depth. I said, if they lose the Strider start, the series is over. And guess what? They had to have Strider start twice. They lost both. He gave them what? I think he gave up 4 runs. I think he gave up 3 in 1 and another one, or 3 in game 4. And I think he gave up either 0 or 1 in his first start. And the Braves gave him absolutely no run support to help him. Best lineup in baseball during the regular season, best lineup potentially the last like 10, 15 years, based on like OPS and a couple other metrics. And they just kind of got crushed by a Phillies team that was just built a little bit better. And now a lot of people want to talk about like, oh, well, the Braves choked, they blew it, they lost because of basically they had a week off, they had like a bye week almost. Like, that's such a stupid like copium sort of thing to try to like make you feel better about it, because it's really not the case. The Braves were just not built to beat the Phillies, and they kind of just got spanked by them for that. And it's like all the other teams, like people will look at it like we talked about, like, oh, the Dodgers got crushed. They had the week off. The Braves got destroyed. They had the week off. And then the Orioles got destroyed. They had the week off. Like, all those teams had big problems that you can look at and point to, instead of being like, oh, well, here's why they lost, was they weren't in rhythm for a week. That's bullshit, because last year they had the same thing and the team split. And it was like sort of similar, but it's like, oh, the Braves starting pitching destroyed. The like even the teams that won like 90 games plus, like the Brewers had no help like from their lineup. The Dodgers starting pitching is terrible, and their lineup didn't do anything. The Orioles were extremely young and just sort of got. Like it's people will not look at it with any context behind it, and that's what sucks because like there should be no question. There should be no questions and no excuses. Like the Phillies played better baseball than the Braves, and the Braves, like you said, I think we're extremely lucky to get one game.
Yeah, I mean, they just didn't really have that clutch lineup like we've seen them have all year. I mean, you mentioned the Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman underperformance for the Dodgers against the Diamondbacks, and we sort of saw that with the other NL MVP candidates and Matt Olson and Ronald Acuna. Both of them were terrible, and that sort of really shut down the offense because those guys carried them throughout the year. And while this is a team that's really good 1 through 9, you get to the bottom of the lineup and you're just like relying on Orlando Arcia and a couple like Kevin Pillar or whatever, Eddie Rosario, guys that really haven't done much for them all year. And then when the top of the lineup isn't coming through, Matt Olson, you really just got Austin Riley doing everything because Sean Murphy wasn't really great in the second half. And Ozzie Albies, didn't do much either. It's really easy to see why that didn't come through. And I don't think that's a fault of like a weak layoff. I think that's just the Phillies having a really good game plan to shut them down, and also just maybe the lights being too bright. But you mentioned that Michael Harris play, and that might have been like one of the peaks of the postseason. I mean, I have a feeling this series might be the peak of the postseason, just because there were so many like fun storylines, so much like Twitter discourse to come out of it. But that one really set the stage for what the rest of that series would be, because that was the Braves really escaped narrowly from that, but that play was pretty incredible. You had Bryce Harper on first, the tying run. Nick Castellanos crushed a ball to right center field. Michael Harris, one of the best center fielders in the game, made an incredible jumping catch at the wall, was able to relay the throw in. It got by the relay guys, and Austin Riley comes out of nowhere, does like a crazy play that you see third basemen make on like bunts to the third base side. He made that basically from the shortstop position, made an incredible throw to double off Harper at first, who made it somewhat of a base running blunder, but I think he just wanted to take advantage of that ball to right center field and make sure he scored. But that really set the stage for the rest of the series because, it really looked like the Braves might take the momentum from that and move forward. But probably the biggest story from maybe the whole postseason thus far, Orlando Arcia in the clubhouse exclaiming "Attaboy Harper" while media members were there, and that really started a lot of arguments in many different areas of the game, whether that be arguing about the Braves versus the Phillies, or whether that be arguing about reporters reporting things they hear in the clubhouse. But it really took a life of its own. And I think at the end, everybody took the correct side on the reporter thing. I mean, we saw Alana Rizzo go off on Mad Dog Russo's podcast. I think one of the funniest things Davis said this past week was saying that she was saying the dumbest shit on a podcast with Mad Dog Russo, which is pretty impossible to do. But that was pretty funny. And luckily she came out and apologized the next day. She talked to Jake Mintz, who was the one who was getting a lot of shit for that. But definitely a lot of crazy stuff happening there.
Yeah, you talked about this being like the one that set like the stage for like that game setting the stage for this series. For me, that set the stage for the playoffs. This felt like this was this first series because all of the wild card series were sweeps, and there weren't many like really, really huge moments in them. It felt so much like this was the first series that was, this is the playoffs. This is what's going on. Here's the tense moments. Here are the storylines that are being created. You had the Michael Harris catch and play from Austin Riley. You had Trey Turner going off. You had obviously the Attaboy Harper thing, and then the ensuing Bryce Harper being Atlanta's daddy again, and staring down Orlando Arcia, and then the Braves announcers being crybabies about it, all that stuff that you can talk about. Like, this was the series that felt like, okay, here's everything that's going on. This is the playoffs. It is starting to get like tense now, because like, even if you look at the rest of the series, like, well, the Dodgers kind of just got smacked around. The Rangers kind of swept the Orioles, and that game, like that series sort of felt like it was over in a flash, really, because it was a sweep. But that game sort of like that series, sort of felt like, all right, well, it's over. Like they played like it felt like they played like one game and they just ended the series.
Mhm.
At least for me, I didn't watch all that much of it. Same with the Twins. I don't think anyone really gave the Twins a chance. This felt like, all right, shit's starting to get real. So I really enjoyed watching this. I watched every single game of this one. So yeah, it was a good series, and the storylines, obviously, like you said, Alana Rizzo. It's a good thing she apologized. She did. She definitely did look like a complete idiot. With which when you're talking to Chris,
getting roasted.
When you're talking to Mad Dog, it feels like a Herculean task to be stupider than Mad Dog. But yeah, it's good, and we can talk about the championship series now, which is
wait. I still have more stuff to say about the Phillies and Braves.
Say more stuff, man. Jay.
Yeah, I mean, there was, I think, after all of that sort of settled down, then there was sort of the discussion about, would the Phillies have won without the Attaboy Harper thing? And we sort of had our own argument internally about that. And I think we land on different sides of that because I didn't get why it was such a big controversy that was reported, because that seems like such a nothing thing to say. Attaboy Harper, obviously, like Harper fucked up, and everybody wants to say like, oh well, Harper is the type of guy that has that FU energy. He's gonna take whatever, he's like Michael Jordan, whatever thing he can use to make himself angry, he's gonna use that to like take his game to another level. I'm like, he still hits those home runs in that game. The Phillies still win. The Phillies still win the series, and I really don't think it made that much of a difference. He hit 2 homers in that game. Nick Castellanos hit 2 homers in that game. And he actually, just deviating for a second, Nick Castellanos hit 2 homers in back-to-back games with multiple home runs, became the first player ever with multiple home runs in back-to-back games in postseason history. I think he became one of 3 players ever with 4 homers in a 2-game span in postseason history. And I'll remain on this tangent for just a second. We all know how Nick Castellanos lives for times of peril in the world, or in the time of the broadcast. It all started with the and that'll make it a 4-0 ball game drive when he was on the Reds. And now with the world in a pretty terrible state right now, with everything that's going on in Israel with Gaza and Palestine and everything. He took the powers from that, and he became the best player of all time. And it's pretty funny that just like that meme will never die, because Nick Castellanos just continues to thrive off terrible situations. But I don't know if you want to comment on that or sort of refute my point about the Phillies, not like they were going to win anyway, and that quote was pretty stupid.
Yeah, sure. Did you see the interview with whatever reporter it was after the game where he told him about his like accolade, like he's the first person ever to do that?
Yeah, I was watching that live.
He just went like,
where's the question?
What's the question?
I was watching that live because I didn't really know much about Nick Castellanos. I watched it live and I was like, that guy is real. Like he's just like a real dude. Like I think it can come off as like being a douchebag or an asshole or something. But I thought it was just like he's not gonna like do the cliche baseball thing where he just says like, oh, I'm doing this, it doesn't matter about the team or whatever. Like he was just like, we just want to win the World Series. Cool. Like glad I know that, but like I'm just gonna like be myself. He said the F word on MLB Network later that night.
Yeah, those were the first 2 games that he's got to have Liam at the stadium, his son.
He was losing his mind,
and then he went off. Yeah, I really like Nicholas Castellanos. I completely agree. I mean, with the point that you said earlier about the Phillies and Braves. I mean, obviously Bryce hits the 2 home runs regardless of what Arcia says. Bryce Elder probably wants the first one back. He threw him a hanging slider literally right down the middle. But yeah, he definitely does hit those 2 home runs back. And if you've seen the take from Carabas on Pardon My Take, where he's like, he loves Harper because he's just the embodiment of Philly, and that really does fit him because Bryce Harper is completely and totally fueled by spite 100% of the time. So if you piss him off, he's just like Superman. The thing though, I think, in my opinion, I agree with you. His actions on the field still happen exactly the same, even if Arcia doesn't say the thing, but the ramifications of him staring a hole through him and doing the throat slit gesture, that sort of probably could get in your head a little bit, I think. And if you go and look at it too, Orlando Arcia already was struggling in the postseason, and then
he was lost in that last game.
He was freaking out in the dugout, fucking around with fans.
Yeah.
Like you can tell that it's starting to get in the Braves' heads a little bit after that
Because
happens.
that's my follow-up question. Do you think it just like seeped into everyone else that they
I
had to
do.
sort of take on what? Because I could see,
Like
I
they have to
understand how
defend
it.
him because he's their
Yeah,
teammate,
I
and
understand how it
like
affects Arcia.
yeah, like they have to defend him because he's their teammate, and Travis d'Arnaud looks like the biggest like weenie in the world because he's like, oh the clubhouse is our safe place. Like it's open media time, and he said
I
it
loved
within
all the
earshot of
memes coming
Jake
off
Metz.
that. You're just like the dugout's a sanctuary, and you have like Michael Lorenzen with like the Budweiser box on his head, like in overalls. It's like
nobody
this place is a
nobody should
sanctuary.
post that.
Which
This
is
is a
crazy
sanctuary.
that because Alana Rizzo was saying that same stuff, and
It's
she
stupid.
like had an affair with Chris Iannetta
Yeah. hmm
at having been a dugout reporter, and it's just like it's not a sanctuary. It is
It's
a
not.
place, and also it like it opens up the door for you to be like, oh right, if you can't say that somebody said attaboy Harper in the dugout, which is such a nothing burger to me, and
Yeah,
it
for
only
real. It
became
is.
something because Harper hit a couple home runs and made a big deal about it. Imagine the other stuff that people are saying in the dugouts that aren't being allowed to come out because the dugout is a sanctuary. It's somewhat concerning. It's somewhat not understandable, but like something that I would expect. It's somewhat expected that I'm sure there's tons of shit being said in there that you wouldn't hear from most people. You wouldn't expect to hear from these guys that are supposed to be role models or whatever. But I mean, if that's such a controversial thing, imagine like the other stuff that's being said in the dugout that doesn't get out. But I can see how Arcia's sort of struggles dealing with that and how that sort of seeps into the rest of the team, sort of takes the vibes
Mhm.
down because he was just in an awful state in that fourth game, just arguing with fans in the bleachers, and you saw
Yeah.
Ronald Acuna having to take
Literally had
his
to like
mind away.
pull him
Yeah,
back. Like
yeah, but he's taken his mind away from the game to do that. He's like not thinking about the game. He's focused more on like Arcia not making a fool of himself and his teammates, rather than thinking about like what is the pitcher throwing, what am I going to do in my next at bat. And I can see how that could be a distraction, maybe not something that like really gets in their heads, but it's something that's like
mhm.
it takes them away from the game.
That's a really good point. And that's sort of what I was trying to get at. It is definitely a
Sure.
distraction. And the thing about like, oh, it's the clubhouse is a safe place. He said it during open media time directly after a game. It's not like Jake Mintz literally like went and did like the meme where he like slides his phone up under like the screen like
People
like
had audio recordings of it. It wasn't like
yeah,
something that
no,
he like said quietly.
it's not, and it's so stupid. But I completely do agree. It definitely like it has to take the Braves away from that because not only are they trying to worry about like Arcia making a fool of himself, because like he definitely was like Acuna is trying to pull him back in the dugout so he's not acting like an idiot. Like they have to answer those questions. They have to deal with that, and that's just constant when they're already. It's one like it's what it's 1-1. They're up against it against the Phillies, who they probably are not matched up well with right now. And then it's like, okay, here's an extra distraction on top of it. It definitely doesn't. I mean, like it definitely doesn't help. Like it might not be the biggest hindrance in the world, but it's definitely not doing them any favors or helping them out in
they
that
were they
case.
were equally matched teams, and that might have been the deciding factor that sort of
hmm
set the Phillies apart in the final game or so. But yeah, it was
Yeah,
definitely I'm not sure we'll see storylines this impactful in the championship series. Maybe once we get to the World Series, depending on the matchup. But yeah, that was pretty interesting, pretty
it
crazy.
definitely it definitely was, and it's gonna be pretty crazy, just like the championship series, which are gonna be played completely in Texas by the Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros. And we'll talk about that one first. Obviously, the ALCS, and we've talked about both sides a little bit at length, but we can go and talk about this and sort of give our picks, I think, as to who we think are probably going to win. We did our bracket, obviously, last podcast, but things have changed.
Been
Um,
busted.
yeah. So, uh, what are your initial thoughts just on this series, and what side do you think currently has the advantage based on what we know about the teams in their current states?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you had told me this matchup at the beginning of the postseason, I would have had a pretty decisive opinion that the Astros would take this. I mean, they're just so well built for the postseason. But I think the Rangers are going to make it a series. I don't think that they will end up winning it, but I think they'll make it closer than we would have initially expected at the outset of October. That lineup, the Rangers lineup, is really hitting on all cylinders right now, just 1 through 9. It's a really difficult lineup to get through. And with the rotation that, like I said, is probably getting Scherzer back for the championship series, that could be a huge difference maker, especially in now we're in a 7-game series. Obviously, you can survive with 2 starters, Dormont and Eovaldi, across a wild card series or a division series. But once you get to 7 games, you really have to start eating into that rotation, whether that be Scherzer or even a 4th starter in like Dane Dunning or Andrew Heaney or whoever you go with there. It really is a important to have a 3rd starter that you can really trust. And having Scherzer, who's a big game guy, he may not be the same pitcher that he was when he was pitching for the Nationals in 2019, but this is a guy who loves the big moment and he gets hyped for that kind of stuff. And I think he's really going to take advantage of it. Even if he's not as good, he doesn't have the same stuff that he used to have. I think he's going to be a big difference maker. But I think like if the Astros have a really good lineup, and I think it matches up well with the Rangers. But if you say the Rangers have the advantage there, and maybe it's a tie in the rotation, because the Astros have a pretty freaking good rotation too. Then it comes down to the bullpen, where the Astros have one of the best bullpens in baseball, and the Rangers have maybe the worst bullpen in all of the playoffs, even at the outset, not with just the 4 remaining teams. They clearly do. But the middle relief options they have are not trustworthy when you're turning to Aroldis Chapman in the 7th or 8th inning. And this is a guy who has historically not had success in the postseason and really struggled recently. Then it really just comes down to Jose Leclerc, which you can't pitch him in every single game. And who knows if he's going to be invincible for the rest of the postseason. But that's I don't want to say untrustworthy, but it's a guy without a track record to really allow you to put a lot of trust into him. And I think that's going to be the difference maker there is the bullpen. I don't think they're going to be able to hold it off, but if that Rangers lineup can really just continue to just destroy everyone, and the rotation can just keep them in ball games, keep it give them a solid lead that they just need to hold like 4 or 5 runs across the final few innings, I think they could pull it off. But the Astros are just built so well. They've got such a good rotation and an incredible lineup and a bullpen that's almost unmatched, I think only by the Phillies. I think the Astros are going to take this one. It's probably going to be 6 games.
Yeah, I think the important thing to look at here, obviously, the Astros got the little week off by whatever you want to call it, because of the head-to-head record. They beat the Rangers 9-4 during the regular season and sort of trashed them in quite a few of those games. But Dusty Baker said that the big thing here is it's clean slate now. It depends on how Astros pitching fares versus how the Rangers pitching fares. I think that is going to be the huge battle. And if the Rangers can get the most out of their arms they have left, Jordan Montgomery's supposed to start game 1. I think Eovaldi's penciled for game 2, and they haven't really said anything about the next or about the rest of them. Nathan Eovaldi obviously is sort of like a meme player for like this podcast, because I picked him one time for our Cy Young and like a year ago. He's actually one of the best. Like if you look at his stats, he's kind of looks like one of the best playoff starters ever, like of this generation at least. He's made like 8 starts. He's appeared in 13 games. He got 6-3, a win-loss, thrown 56 2/3. He's got a 2.70 ERA with a 2.3 FIP. And a 209 like batting average against. Like he's really good. Max Scherzer obviously isn't what he used to be, but if he's still remotely effective, I think that's sort of the conversation we need to have now. I do think the Rangers lineup is better than the Astros, but I think everything else the Astros have is probably better than Rangers. Yeah. I think my heart is really going to go here. I'm going to go Rangers in 7. I think the Rangers offense is going to be really lighten it up. I think they're going to win in 7, which means that they're going to get swept. But I'm going to go Rangers in 7 for my prediction here, for them to get to the World Series.
Battle for Texas is pretty cool. I'd love to see like a game 4 Justin Verlander versus Max Scherzer or something.
That would be dope.
That would be really sick. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of storylines here. I think just the fact that it's 2 Texas teams already gives it that sort of unnatural rivalry there. Obviously they're division rivals, but these aren't teams where you're just like, oh man, Astros and Rangers, they hate each other. But I think we could see a little bit of a rivalry naturally occurring because they play in the same state. But it should be pretty interesting. I think this is a pretty good matchup we could see, because I think even you think of the other options that could have been here, like whether it be the Rays or the Orioles that would have matched up against the Astros. I think I like the Rangers matching up against the Astros. I think they got a good shot. I think we did the whole roster breakdowns there, but just like the way that they're hitting, and I think the vibes that they got right now, it should be a very interesting series. And I think it's probably the most fun matchup that we could have seen versus the other options that the Astros would have had to face.
Definitely, and that just leaves us with one series left to talk about, the NLCS, which is the Arizona Diamondbacks completing that little list talked about earlier. They're the last expansion franchise that the Phillies will play, ever the first team to do that, but it will be the Phillies and the Arizona Diamondbacks in the NLCS. And how do you see this one shaping up?
This one's really clear for me. The Diamondbacks have really surprised this postseason. They have not lost yet, but I don't think they really stand a chance against the Phillies. Not only do the Phillies have the vibes and the momentum coming off this last series, but they beat the best team in baseball in their last series. I don't think they really have any feelings that, the Diamondbacks are going to really pose a threat to them. And obviously you can't underrate your opponent, especially one that made it all the way to the NLCS, taking down the Dodgers. But the Phillies line up much better than the Diamondbacks. The rotations I think can match up a little bit, but I mean Wheeler and Nola versus Gallen and Kelly, I think that goes Phillies. And then if you get deeper in that rotation, the Diamondbacks really just have Brandon Pfaadt and nobody else. So I think they match up. The Phillies got an advantage there. And then the bullpens, I think Diamondbacks bullpen pretty underrated, but that Phillies bullpen might be the best in the whole playoff. So I'm taking Phillies here, and I think they win it in 5.
I think that's pretty accurate. I think of these teams left, I think Philly's probably the most prepared to try to make a World Series push from here. I think I'm going to go Phillies in 6. So let's be nice to the Diamondbacks. So let's go Phillies in 6.
Yeah, I give them a win.
Well, I'll give them 2.
So that means you've got Rangers, Phillies. I've got Astros, Phillies. This is our World Series potential matchups. Who do you think has the advantage there? I know we still have a whole week and a half of storylines to build and analysis to do, and obviously the final decision on who's going to be in the World Series. But considering the matchup that you've predicted, who do you think has the advantage in the World Series?
I think the Phillies. I think of the 4 teams left currently in the playoffs, I think the Phillies are the best team, top to bottom. I mean, they had the second best lineup. Team with the best lineup probably gone. The only team that really matches up to them is the Rangers, which I have them against. Their starting pitching would be better than the Rangers. Their bullpen is obviously better than the Rangers, and I think that sort of gives them the advantage in that head-to-head. Even in that, I don't even think that would go to 7. I think the Phillies would probably win that one in 6.
Yeah,
against the Rangers.
I think I'm in the same boat. I mean, my predictions have not been great overall, but my initial prediction at the outset of the postseason was Astros Phillies rematch with the Phillies winning this time. So I'm just going to stick with it all the way.
As long as the Phillies win, I'm good with it.
Yeah, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. I missed a lot of stuff. I'm pissed at myself for not taking a shot at saying the Dodgers are dog shit. But Phillies, Astros, I think the Phillies are going to take that one. I think it's going to be close. I think that's going to be like a 7-gamer. Phillies, Astros is just such a great matchup. And the deciding factor for me, because I know the Astros won last year. I think it was 5 games, 6 games. The Astros won it pretty handily. But these are like 2 same teams, except now the Phillies are better. The Astros haven't really changed much. Obviously, they have minor changes here and there, but the Phillies are the same team, except now they've added Trey Turner. Bryson Stott and Brandon Marsh are getting older and becoming better players. They have a actually good defensive outfield now with Johan Rojas in center field, who made that crazy catch in game 4 of the DS. But that alongside a bullpen that has added Gregory Soto and Jeff Hoffman, Craig Kimbrell. You got some really, really good options in that bullpen. That whole team has just all of the deficiencies that were there last year that still allowed them to make it to Game 6 of the World Series. I think this year is the difference maker that allows them to take that next step. So I really have a feeling like the Phillies are just so perfectly built for this postseason. Who knows going forward? But this year, I think the Phillies are clearly the favorite for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for the AL series, I think the Rangers just are gonna have to win games for the most part. Like that, these series will most likely just be slugfests, in my opinion. And whichever team is probably going to be that wins is probably going to be the team that wins the World Series, with 1,000-5 to 1,000-6. So something like that. I have no clue. It's gonna be all over the place. It's gonna be a nuke fest. I'm excited for it because I think these series are gonna be really fun. The Diamondbacks sort of like plucky underdog. It's always kind of nice to root for them too. But the Phillies sort of have that vibe in general. The Phillies sort of always rock that vibe for me. I'm just really stoked. For me, that's the team that I'm pulling for. I've been pulling for them from the start. Obviously, I'm hating on the Braves because I really hated the whole stupid video montage thing. So that was cool to watch them win that series. But hating aside, I wanted the Phillies to win this in general, just from the start. So excited to watch that. And talked about bullpens potentially being a big factor in the playoffs, closing out series deciding games. We can close out this podcast by bringing the closer as we always do.
Yes, and this week we've got Dennis Eckersley, and I had time to do this one, a guy that had a really long career. He's obviously been one that we've had queued up for a while, but there was little setup I had to do for this podcast because it was just discussing postseason stuff. I didn't really need to prepare anything, so it allowed me to focus on bringing the closer. So we get Dennis Eckersley this week. I chose him mostly because he has the fourth most saves all time in postseason history, trailing Brad Lidge, Mariano Rivera, Kenley Jansen, and fifth place now is Ryan Presley. So a couple active guys that I wouldn't want to cover, and a couple guys that we've already covered, Mariano Rivera and Brad Lidge. So we'll go to Dennis Eckersley. I think this one works out pretty well. It's a long one. Strap in. Here we go. Dennis Eckersley had a 24-year career from 1975 to 1998, during which he pitched for the Indians, the Red Sox, the Cubs, the A's, and the Cardinals. He was drafted by the Indians in the third round of the 1972 draft and debuted in April of 1975 versus the Brewers, during which he tossed 1 2/3 innings, allowing just 1 hit, no earned runs, 1 walk, and 1 strikeout. And despite opening his career out of the pen, Eckersley was a starter for the first half of his career. He started 24 of the 34 games in which he pitched in his debut campaign. That year, he pitched to a 2.60 ERA, but also had his first 2 saves. He became an instant fan favorite for the Cleveland team because of his long hair, his mustache, nice, that sounds like me, and his lively fastball. Maybe I just need a lively fastball and I could be Dennis Eckersley. But Eckersley solidified himself as one of the best starters in baseball in just his second season. That year, 3.43 ERA. He had 1 more save, but he also set a career high with 200 strikeouts. And then he finally received national recognition in 1977. That year, he pitched 247 and a third innings pitched, unheard of in this era. He had a 3.53 ERA and a major league leading 3.54 strikeout to walk ratio. He also made his first All-Star team, and he threw a no-hitter that year. Pretty cool. And then capitalizing on Eckersley's success, the Indians traded him to the Red Sox for 4 players, none of which were notable, and he had immediate success in Boston. 1978, he set a career high with 20 wins and 268 and a third innings pitched. That was also a career high, and he had a 2.99 ERA that year. He finished 4th in American League Cy Young Award voting and 31st in American League MVP award voting. And then 1979, he followed up with an identical 2.99 ERA, which translates to a 149 ERA plus, which calculates that number based off how the rest of the league pitched that year, run environment, ballpark, and everything like that. But he led the majors, 149 ERA plus, and he finished 7th in American League Cy Young Award voting. And after those pairs of great seasons, Eckersley took a step back for the remainder of his time in Boston as his fastball velocity cratered, likely due to his immense workload. As I mentioned, back-to-back seasons of more than 240 innings pitched. 1980, he had a 4.28 ERA. 1981, he had a 4.27 ERA. He added a slider to his repertoire, which he hoped to offset his declining heater. This was a 4-pitch guy while he was a starter, but he incorporated a slider that helped offset the decline of his fastball. And so that helped him bounce back a little in 1982, 3.73 ERA. and an American League leading 2.95 strikeout to walk ratio. He also earned his second All-Star appearance that year, but then he was bad again in 1983. He had a 5.61 ERA, one of the worst seasons of his career. And then midway through the following season, 1984, the Red Sox shipped him to the Cubs in exchange for the infamous Bill Buckner. And after pitching to a 5.01 ERA in 64 2/3 innings in Boston, he figured things out with a change of scenery with a 3.03 ERA across 160 1/3 innings with the Cubs. His first full season with the Cubs was great, but his second was decidedly not. 1985, the first one, he had a 3.08 ERA and a major league leading 6.16 strikeout to walk ratio. But in 1986, he produced a 4.57 ERA. And after that season, 1986, he checked himself into a rehab center for alcoholism. And that was a smart choice because not only would it save probably his life, but also his career. And it set him up for a very different yet successful second half to his career. Eckersley was traded to the A's the following season prior to 1987. After a couple starts, an injury to the A's closer set up Eckersley to take over the closer role in Oakland, and the transition went pretty well and allowed him to take his game to another level. That year, he pitched to a 3.03 ERA in 16 saves. But then he had established himself as maybe the most dominant closer in baseball in 1988. That year, he had a 2.35 ERA, a major league leading 45 saves. He earned his third All-Star appearance. He finished second in American League Cy Young Award voting, fifth in American League MVP award voting, and he earned his first AL Raleigh's Relief Man of the Year award. And then he got even better in 1989, a 1.56 ERA, a career best 0.61 whip, and 33 saves. That allowed him to finish sixth in American League Cy Young Award voting and fifth in American League MVP award voting. And he also won his first and only World Series that year with the A's. Pretty cool. But as amazing as that season was, it wasn't even the best of this stretch of 5 years that he had from 1988 to 1992. 1990, he produced probably the best season of his career, and it is some mind-boggling numbers. He had a career best 0.61 ERA that up to 3 decimal points matched his whip of 0.61. Both of those were at 0.614, and he had 48 saves that year. It earned him his fourth All-Star appearance. He finished fifth in American League Cy Young Award voting and sixth in American League MVP award voting. And I think the craziest stat from this stretch was Eckersley was like a really good control and command guy during his time as a starter, but when he became a reliever, it was like uncanny how good he was at controlling his pitches. And between August 7th, 1989 and June 10th of 1990, a stretch that consisted of 41 appearances, Eckersley didn't walk a single batter across 41 appearances across 2 different seasons, almost a full year. And that set a record for consecutive appearances without a walk. And that still stands today and will likely never be broken. He also became the first reliever in baseball history with more saves than base runners allowed. He had 48 saves and had fewer base runners in that. Pretty wild. The success continued in 1991, 2.96 ERA, 43 saves, his fifth All-Star appearance. But then his career sort of peaked in 1992. That year, not as good as 1990, but he did get the accolades to make up for it. 1.91 ERA. He led the American League with 65 appearances and led the majors with 51 saves, which set a career high, and it allowed him to become the first of 2 pitchers ever with a 20-win season and a 50-save season. The other was John Smoltz, who did so for the Braves. He won the American League Cy Young that year. He also won the American League MVP. And at the time, he joined Willie Hernandez and Raleigh Fingers as the only relievers ever to achieve the double feat of Cy Young and MVP in the same season. Obviously, he won the American League Raleigh's Relief Man of the Year award that year. That was also his final All-Star appearance. Actually, I don't even think he was an All-Star that year. That's wild. But to recap, those 5 seasons from 1988 to 1992, that's 5 years. His average season across 5 seasons was 72 innings pitched, a 1.90 ERA, a 0.79 whip, 76 strikeouts to 8 walks, and 44 saves. Just a really incredible peak for one of the best closers of all time. After that peak, His numbers slipped across his final trio of seasons in Oakland. 1993 at a 4.16 ERA and 36 saves. 1994, 4.26 ERA and 19 saves. The A's then decided not to exercise his option after 1994, but they made him the first free agent to sign after the 1994 labor dispute. He signed for 1 year. That 1 year, he pitched to a 4.83 ERA with 29 saves. And following the 1995 season, manager Tony La Russa left the A's to go to the Cardinals, and he urged the front office to bring Eckersley along with him. They did so, and he discovered that he still had a little bit more left in the tank, despite now pitching in his 40s. 1996, 3.30 ERA and 30 saves. 1997, 3.91 ERA and 36 saves. And then Eckersley signed with the Red Sox for the final season of his career at the age of 43, where he served as the setup man to closer Tom Gordon. That year, he pitched to a 4.76 ERA and recorded the final save of his career, a career in which he racked up 62.1 Baseball Reference WAR across 3,285 and 2/3 innings pitched, while striking out 2,401 batters with a 3.50 ERA and a 1.16 WHIP. He racked up 390 saves throughout the entirety of his 24-year career, which lands him 9th on the all-time saves leaderboard. He retired having appeared in the most games in Major League history, and now he ranks 5th all-time, but still one of the best closers of all time. A pretty crazy career. Imagine if he was a closer his whole career.
Insane. If he was a closer his whole career,
he would not have so many more saves than Mariano.
Yeah, he would. But he also would not have one thing that is standalone, or not standalone, but he's the last person to accomplish it. He's the last player in baseball history to appear in 1,000 games or more and have 100 complete games. So he accomplished it as a starter. He's the last one that's done it. And I don't think anyone's probably going to do that again.
That's crazy.
Which is crazy. But yeah, he is extremely good, obviously known for his postseason heroics. But we can talk potential postseason heroics on the next podcast when you join us on, I don't know, whatever day we start to do it. But as always, this has been the Free Baseball Podcast. I'm Davis Bird. You can follow me on Twitter at DVSBird, where I will be tweeting about the postseason games and all sorts of other sports stuff that is going on right now. And you can follow Jake on his Twitter at Jake Crumpler, and check him out on the 48 kajillion sites he writes for that are all excellent. Like
48 kajillion is more like 2. Pitcherlist.com. They are great. Pitcherlist.com, one of the best baseball websites out there. Baseball HQ as well. I don't know when I'll be writing articles this month for Pitcher List, but I should come out with at least one. And obviously, like I mentioned before, In the Pen podcast coming out every other Friday during the off season. And I should be doing a guest podcast at some point this off season on the Corner, which is Pitcher List's main podcast. But outside of that, doing a little bit of behind the scenes work over at baseballhq.com. So the off season gets a little bit quieter, but I think that allows me to put more effort into the Free Baseball Podcast, and it sort of becomes my main thing during the off season. But you can catch all my stuff, like David said, at Jake Crumpler on Twitter, and also crumplerbaseball.com is where you can find all of my work, all of our podcasts, all of my podcasts, all of my articles, everything.
He has fantasy baseball draft rankings on there too. If you want to look at those are cool.
Old.
They are old. Make new ones, Jake. Put your new ones in there.
I'm working on it, and I don't know if I want to put them out there because it makes people beat me in fantasy baseball, which is not fun.
Well, yeah. Jake's
like
real
you.
Good. And beginner's luck. Yeah. Also, make sure you check out the Athletes Hub on their Twitter page, where you are likely seeing this. Also, at Athletes Hub, and check out the website, which is at theathleteshub.org. There's a whole bunch of stuff on there coming out. I don't know, trickling out relatively slowly, but hopefully it'll pick up once the football season sort of picks up and once basketball starts, which will be very exciting. It's fan-made articles that are pretty easy to read. They're pretty quick. It helps us out, so just go check those out. Other than that, enjoy watching postseason baseball and check with us next time. Peace.